I'm going to go ahead and just get started. It looks like we've got most everybody on. So I'm going to share the desktop. And so now everybody should be um, uh, looking at Tableau. Let me go ahead and change my mouse real quick. Whoops. Sorry, still learning how to do this stuff. Here we go. All right. Okay, so we're in Tableau, and what I'm going to do is start the way we're really going to be starting almost every class while we're using Tableau. I'm going to open up our Superstores worksheet that has the data we're going to be analyzing. So I'm just clicking on Microsoft Excel. I showed you last week how to find this file, but I guess just in case, I'll do this one more time for everyone. You go into your documents folder if you're on a Mac. I think it would still be your documents folder even on a Windows machine. Find your My Tableau repository, go to data sources, click on the version that you have. Everybody should be using version 2020.1, and then open up the Superstores file. Once you open that up, you are in your data connection screen, then just drag the order sheet onto the screen. And now we have access to all of those, I think it's 9,994 rows of data. And then we're going to just click on sheet 1, and we're going to begin developing some visualizations. While I am doing this, if you have any questions about anything, feel free. You can unmute your mics. You have the ability to do that, or your video camera, or both. So please feel free to do that and just let me know if you have a question. You can also just go into chat as well, and I'll be trying my best to monitor chat to see if there's a question there that I can answer before moving on. A lot of what we're going to be doing in Tableau, you could do multiple ways. So I'll be showing you one way, and I might be able to show you different ways as we go through different visualizations. But what we're going to do right now is simply, again, talk about the difference between dimensions and measures. Oh, yes, someone just got Tableau open. Did you, do you have the Superstore spreadsheet open? Okay, and did you drag orders? You took orders and dragged it over to this part of the screen, and then you as long as you see all the data here, then you have it open correctly, and then just click on sheet 1. So I'll wait. So when you, yep, this is being recorded right now, so you'll be able to look at it again. So let me go ahead and back up and just restart everything so everybody can see what I did. So I'm going to close this out and not save it. All right, so again, this is how I started. I obviously first started Tableau. Then I clicked on Microsoft Excel because that's the type of file we're going to use. Now I'm going to select the Superstore spreadsheet, click open. As soon as that opens, I'm going to take the orders worksheet within that file and just click it right here where it says drag sheets here. And now I have all my underlying data. And then I'm clicking on sheet 1. So is everybody good? Everybody's where I am now? All right, excellent. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a simple bar chart. And what I'm going to do is take sales, and I'm going to drag it over to columns. And we see that what Tableau is doing, and we talked about this a little bit on class on Thursday, is whenever we have a measure, and one of the definitions of a measure is data that can be aggregated, Tableau is going to come up with a default aggregation. And you can see here that the default aggregation is sum. So if you go to this pill, remember that's the term that Tableau gives for this, and go and choose this drop down arrow, we could actually tell Tableau to use a different aggregation. So for example, we could ask Tableau, what is the overall average sales for our data set? $229.90. If we want to find out what the median is, $54.49. If we want to find out what the minimum sales amount is, 44 cents. What's the maximum sale? We could find that out as well, $22,638. So we can change the aggregation that Tableau is doing. I forgot to do one count. Let's just do it. This is how we get our 9,994 number of records that I was referring to earlier. So play around with that, again, to make sure you understand what a measure is all about. And then what dimensions dimensions are what provides the level of detail. Right now, the level of detail is simply sales. What's our overall sales in this underlying data set? But if I take category and I drag category onto rows, now my level of detail is changing. Notice right down here, it says 3 marks. Here's mark 1, mark 2, and mark 3. The bar, the length of the bar represents the amount of sales for furniture, for office supplies, and for technology. Notice a couple of things. What Tableau is doing is it's automatically, if you look in the mark shelf right here, it's automatically selecting the bar chart. Excuse me. And it's automatically selecting the bar chart based on the data that I'm using right now, a measure, sales, and one dimension category. We can modify that, and we'll be doing that later on. But generally, not always, but generally, Tableau will provide the best visualization out of all the visualizations that Tableau has available to us. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take region, if I could find it. And what I'm going to do is, making sure what I'm doing is correct. Actually, I think this is all that I want to do. Okay, so if we want to know what category has the greatest sales, this is pretty, a simple visualization. I just clicked right here in the toolbar to sort. So you could sort ascending, you could sort descending. That's what these toolbars do. This toolbar right here just swaps whatever's in our column shelf with whatever's in our row shelf. So if we want to see, rather than a horizontal bar chart, but we want to see a vertical bar chart, and that's really mostly a matter of preference. It's just a matter of clicking this icon right here. I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm going to label this sheet. So I'm just double clicking right there where it says sheet 1. And I am going to label this. What did I call this? Hold on for 1 second and get to the right page. And actually, there's one other thing I have to do, but sales by category. The one other thing that I'm going to do is show you how to create a caption. I'm only going to do it on this first visualization that I'm covering with you. And I'm showing it to you because this is how I want you to describe the visualizations you're going to be doing for your assignment. So to do that, you're going to go to the menu item worksheet, and then you're going to click on show caption. And then here's our caption right down here. Just double click on that and just type in whatever you want the caption to be. In terms of the assignment, I'm asking you to describe your visualization and to answer some questions. So you're just going to type your answers here within the caption and then click OK. And then your answer will appear right here. And that way, when I'm doing the grading, I'll be able to look at your visualization and look at the answer to the questions that I was asking. So that's how to create captions. This is we're creating a simple bar chart. I'm going to go ahead and create another visualization, but the visualization I'm going to create is going to build upon this one. So rather than, even though this is pretty simple, I just dragged a measure into the column shelf and a dimension into the row shelf. It only takes a few seconds. What I'm going to do is just duplicate this visualization that we have now and add to it. So this icon right here in the toolbar allows us to duplicate a visualization. So I'm going to click that, and you can see we have the exact same region as we did before. Excuse me, the exact same visualization. I'm going to take another dimension region, and I'm going to drag that to the rows. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to place it before the category pill, right? I have the choice to place it before or after. I'm going to I'm going to place it before. And now, as you can see, we're just getting more level of detail. In other words, we're taking our measure sales, and the level of detail that we're looking at now is for each region, what are the sales of each category, furniture, office supplies, or technology within each region. And again, it's being sorted because the previous visualization was sorted as well. And so we could play around. What's a better way to visualize this? Do we want to see region first or region second? I could drag region over. And now we're looking at each of the categories, and then within the categories, which region has the highest sales. So you could see, depending on the question that you're asking, is going to determine how you want to lay out your visualization. So hopefully that makes sense. And the way I have it right now is allowing us to answer the question, which region and within each region, which category has the highest sales. So I'm going to just go ahead and label this region by category. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to continue working with this visualization and building on it. So again, I'm going to duplicate this particular sheet. So we're looking at the same thing right now. And what I'm going to do is drag region off of the row and onto the color shelf. Now, as soon as I do this, I get a very different type of visualization. This is called a stacked bar. So this, what I'm showing you here is basically how to get a stacked bar visualization. And what you could see is, and this visualization oftentimes is not the best visualization. It's good for specific things. And what happens and where it becomes difficult, you can see we've got our legend now over here. So you can see in the West, clearly the furniture and technology have higher sales than office supplies. If we just scroll over each of these marks, we could see that furniture is slightly higher in the West than technology. We could also add labels. This icon right here in our toolbar adds labels, and we could see what the actual numbers are. In this type of visualization, even though labels oftentimes clutter, they might be helpful. And here's why. Let me take the labels off. So when we're examining the South region, because in a stacked bar, the next the next dimension, in this case region, it appears right next to wherever the last region ends. They're not side by side anymore. So it's kind of hard to visualize if we just want to look at the South, which of these three categories has the highest sales, because they're not next to each other. So that's one of the issues sometimes that occurs with stack bars. But I did want to show you how to create them. Your numbers could be different if you're using. So Kevin asked. Kevin's numbers are a bit different. You might be using a different data set than I am if you're using a different version. Or if you're using something slightly, if you're not recreating exactly what I'm doing, that might be affecting it also. If you don't see numbers within each bar, you might not have clicked on the label icon, which is right here. Those are two of the areas in which you might have something that looks a little bit different than me. I'm going to go ahead and just call this stack bar, just to label that. Now the next visualization we're going to create is a line chart. And so line charts are good for showing things over time. So I'm just going to create a new worksheet rather than duplicating a worksheet. And again, I'm going to start with sales. And this time I'm going to add it to rows. And again, it's showing me just what our total sales are, $2,297,000, because it's just aggregating our measure. There is no level of detail at this point because we haven't added any dimensions. The dimension I'm going to add now is order date. And I'm going to drag order date to columns. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, we're now looking at a line graph. And you'll notice if we look in the marks card, Tableau has told us that has automatically determined that a line type chart is the best way to visualize that. And that's because we're looking at a measure using some time dimension, in this case, order date. Now, you'll also notice that a couple of things, and I went over this a little bit last week, but I'm going to repeat it again. What I want to do is, instead of looking at year, right? So we're looking at year, excuse me, I'm going to move this out of my way. We're looking at date for 2016, 17, 18, and 19, and we could clearly see from 16 to 17, let me go ahead and put the labels on, our sales decreased slightly, but ever since 2017, our sales have been on a pretty exponential increase year over year, and that's obviously something we are happy to see. But if I don't want to look at this yearly, if I want to look at it quarterly, I could go to the order date. I could go to my drop down arrow, and I'm going to choose quarter. Remember, we have discrete options and continuous options. The discrete are at the top, the continuous are at the bottom. And we know that this is continuous because it's not just quarter two, all the Q2s, but quarter two within a year. That's what this is representing. So I'm going to click on that, and now we see a different, a different line chart. Obviously, we're seeing what the sales were for each quarter within each year. Notice also that when I did that, the color of the pill changed from blue, which was discrete, where it was just summing up the data for each discrete year. Now we're looking at a continuous dimension, and that's why this color is green. But how are what word or words could you use to describe the sales for our superstores company once we go from looking at this just over looking at sales per year, but now looking at sales within each quarter per year? So go ahead, just give me an answer in chat, if you want. What word or words could describe the sales of this company?
Like sporadic,
It's what? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
like sporadic, kind of like up and down.
Yep. So what would be a term for sporadic or up and down? Yeah. So Antonella and Claire and Alexander said it, seasonal, which means sporadic. So all of those were the case. So again, this is an example of, if you look at data one way, one visualization, we were looking at it just by year and looking at it, the dimension as a discrete variable. As soon as we changed it to quarterly and as a continuous variable, now all of a sudden we have much more information and obviously much more level of detail. We went from, let me go back and forth so you could see it. We went from 4 marks, 1 for each year, right? So that's what each of these dots represent. 4 marks to 16 marks when we went to quarters, 4 quarters within each year. And now we're able to see clearly that we have seasonal data. Now, what I want to show you next is all of this, I think, is hopefully showing you the power of Tableau. But the next thing is going to show you how we could really use the power of Tableau. What I'm going to do is, or actually, let me do one thing just to, again, kind of hammer home the difference between continuous and discrete. If instead of looking at the quarters continuously, so Q1 of 2016, Q1 of 2017, right, that's what we're looking at here, Q1 of 2018, Q1 of 2019. If I just want to look at quarterly data, I could choose quarterly data but discrete. And now I'm looking at my total sales for all my first quarter, all my second quarter, all my third quarter, and all my fourth quarters. And this really, again, tells us, gives us information about the seasonality of our data. We could see that our fourth quarter sales are, more than 2 times higher than our first quarter sales, is what this is telling us. But let's go back to this line graph. And now what I want to do is forecast what sales are going to be in 2020 based on this data. To do that, I'm going to click, we're looking at the data tab, but I'm going to click on the analytics tab. And now we have all these different types of analytics that we can use. The one that I want to work with right now is forecasts. And all I have to do is double click on forecasts. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, Tableau provides me with this forecasted data. Again, I have a legend. This is the actual data. This is the forecasted data. And notice that Tableau is smart enough to realize that we're working with seasonal data. And so we see the same seasonal pattern appearing here in our forecast. So it's really, really simple to create a forecast. And if you recall from our first lecture, our big data and data analytics, this is really predictive analytics, looking to the future and being able to answer certain questions about what might happen. We're able to be predicting what will be happening with our sales. I'm going to go ahead and name this. So I'm just double clicking the sheet name, sales over time by quarter. The next thing I'm going to do before we're going to duplicate this and do some other things with this line graph. But if you click anywhere within this forecasted area, or right click, I should say, and then go down to forecast, I want to open up these two things and just talk to you about them real quickly. The first are options. What I want you to understand is that as a user, just as with everything within Tableau, we have the ability to override the default that Tableau is doing. So by default, Tableau is forecasting the next 5 quarters. It's doing it by quarters because the visualization has quarters, but we could change that to make it 1 year or 2 year or 10 quarters or whatever we want to do, right? So I can make this, years may not make sense, but I could, make this. Let's see if I click the right thing, 9 quarters instead of 4 quarters, or do whatever I want. You'll notice that, again, it's automatically doing this by quarters because it realizes that's the level of detail we had before we did the forecast. It's ignoring the last first quarter, so you'll notice we're let me get out of here so you can see, we're actually forecasting our Q4 sales, even though we have that actual value. So if we want to modify that, we can, right? So I could go into the forecast, I could go into forecast options, and I could say I don't want to, right? So there's our actual sales for Q4. And here we're forecasting Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So it just depends on how you want to do it. Again, this is the default that Tableau is doing. You'll also notice that that Tableau is doing this automatically. We could tell it to not use the seasonality, but you'll see if we do that, our forecast is pretty bad because we have seasonal data. And again, Tableau is smart enough to know that we do, and that's how it's using it. So I just want to let you know that there's a lot of choices that we have. And then lastly, I want to go into describe forecast, and we can see all the statistical data related to this forecasted model that you may hopefully remember from some of your Quant 1 or Quant 2 classes. So we have all of that data available so that we can determine ourselves whether this forecast is something that we can rely on. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to, where am I? I'm going to duplicate this and create another visualization based on this line chart. And what I'm going to do is take region and drop it onto the color shelf. Now remember, we have 4 regions. Before I do that, notice down here we have 20 marks. We have 4 quarters and we have 5 years of data, so that's why we have 20 marks. As soon as I drop region onto color, remember color is a mark. We have 4 regions. Now I have 80 marks because I've got each of the quarters, 4 quarters per year, excuse me, and now rather than, let me pull it off and pull it on, rather than just seeing sales by quarter, now we're seeing sales by region, by quarter, by year. And now this begins to be a little hard to read. One of the things that'll make it a bit easier is if I take the labels off, so now the numbers are gone. But the forecasted area is really making this a bit busy. So I'm going to remove the forecast. There's a couple ways to do it, but one of the easiest ways, if we look at the sales pill, notice it has that arrow right there. Pointing towards the top of the pill. That icon, this arrow icon right here, is telling us that we're forecasting sales. So if I go to my drop-down menu and go to forecast result, I can just change that to none. So you can see we've got lots of different, again, choices that we can make. I'm going to just choose none, get rid of it, and now this is a bit easier to read and get an understanding of what might be going on with our sales across region by quarter per year. uh, and one thing that Tableau allows us to do is we could see that the central, the east, and the west are kind of um, following the same roughly the same seasonal pattern. They seem to have the same peaks and valleys, but the south seems a bit different. And if I click on either south here in the legend, what it does is it brings just that line to the forefront and moves everything behind it. And now I'm able to just focus on that. And even if I put on the labels, it makes it a little bit easier to focus on the labels just of that line if that's what I want to do. And so clearly, and this is again something that Tableau wants us to be able to do, and we talked about it in Thursday's class. Excuse me, is we want or what Tableau wants us to be able to do is have the interface basically disappear, ask a question, and then within the visualization, maybe move on to the next question. Because clearly, or at least clearly to me, the South region is very different than the Central, East, and West. Certainly there are some similarities, but there's also some weird things going on. Look right here this is the first quarter of sales in 2018, we seem to be peaking, whereas every other region, the first quarter is declining. So we do have some seasonality, but that seasonality doesn't necessarily match the seasonality of the other three regions. And clearly sales are lower within the South than any of the other regions. Now, I can't really say anything more than that, but that's not bad that we have that understanding just by doing this simple graph. If I click South again, we've got everything back. You could either click a region within the legend, or if I simply click on one of the lines, the same thing happens. Now I'm able to focus on, excuse me, on the East region. Another thing I could do is, let's say, because the South is so weird, maybe I want to exclude it from my analysis. So you'll notice as soon as I click on that, this dialog pops up and I could say exclude, and now my visualization just has the three regions. If I right click anywhere in this visualization and I click on view data, here's the data that I'm graphing, right? And you'll notice that the South is no longer there because I've excluded it. If I click export, it's going to take this data and put it in an Excel spreadsheet so that I could just use that data. Or if I want to send that Excel spreadsheet to people to analyze. This button here, or this icon here on the toolbar, is just to go back. And now I've got all the data again. I could do the opposite. There is some weird stuff going on in the South. So if I just click the South, sorry, went out of there, I could also just say keep only. And now I'm just looking at the South data. And now maybe I could analyze that. So if I view the data there, again, now I've just got the data in the South. Okay, so we're probably not going to be doing very much more analysis, or I'm not. You might, in the various charts that you're going to be doing for your assignment, maybe you'll be able to answer the question, what's going on with the South. At any rate, let's continue. So I am going to call this sales over time by quarter by region. The next thing I'm going to do is to duplicate this. And then I'm going to take subcategory and I'm going to drop it on my color chart. And that's going to do a couple of things. But before I talk about what it's going to do, let me get a drink. Thank you. Is sometimes you might want to know what is the underlying data, for subcategory or product ID or whatever it is. Now, again, we know we could go to data source and look at subcategory, and here's our subcategory column. And so we could scroll up and down and get a sense of what's there. But if we want to know just what are the unique different subcategories, I could go to this pill, choose the drop down arrow, and then click on, let's see if I could find it, describe all the way at the bottom. This will give us all kinds of information about this particular data. And then it tells us there are 17 members. There are 17 different subcategories. And we could copy that and do stuff if we want. But I just wanted to show you how you could do that. What I'm going to do is take subcategory and drop it onto the color shelf. Now, as soon as we do that, Tableau is going to basically replace region with the subcategories. Okay, so we can't have multiple color categories. So I'm going to take the subcategory, drop it on the color shelf, and yikes, we get this line chart that is definitely a bit hard to read, right? We still certainly can highlight things, right? Like, let's take a look at chairs. Let's take a look at something that had our highest sales, which are phones, had the highest sales in Q4 of 2016 and in Q3 of 2019. We could kind of look down here too. And we could see things that don't, where sales clearly are not reaching to the level of some of our other subcategories, so on and so forth. So there is some stuff that we can do with this line chart, but it is a bit hard to read. And goodness, if we put the labels on, it really becomes there's not a whole lot of useful information we're going to get just because there's too much. But there are some things that we could do. Sometimes by changing the level of detail, we could analyze the data better. So what I'm going to do is take category, excuse me, and I'm going to drop it onto rows. And again, I'm going to do it to the left of sales. And now you'll notice that what I've done is I've taken all of the line the line visualizations of sales over time. We're still seeing that, but now obviously the level of detail is by category. And so I could see within furniture the 4 subcategories. Within office supplies, we have quite a few more. So this again may not be the best way to view this data. But within technology, we have 4 subcategories, and that's certainly a bit easier to read. Again, it's hard to say much, but there are certainly a bunch of office supply categories we could see briefly as I'm kind of scrolling line by line, envelopes and labels and supplies and fasteners that have fairly flat sales, right? Across the years, and fairly low, right, compared to everything else. So by adding levels of detail, so we went from, let me remove category. We went from 254 marks. Well, we still have 254 marks. Right, we still have the same number of marks, but now it's just a bit easier to read. And we can continue. Now it might get a little bit crazy. Let's say we want to look at category by region. That's not giving us much information. Let's, whoops. Sorry, did that click something wrong? Let's get this. Sorry, here's what we were looking at. Let's take region here. Yeah, it's still not, it's still kind of difficult to read. So this might not be the best visualization. Anyway, that is our sales over time by quarter, by subcategory. So let's label this correctly. All right, the next couple of charts that I want to do are map charts. And again, this shows, again, some of the powerful type of visualizations that we could do within Tableau. So I'm going to create a new worksheet. So there's my new worksheet. And I'm going to go over here to the dimension called state. Notice it has this globe icon to tell us that Tableau recognizes this as some geographic data. All I'm going to do is double click state. I'm going to click allow. That probably won't happen on your computer. And voila, I have a map of the United States. Excuse me. I don't have Hawaii. I don't have Alaska, but that's because I don't have Hawaii or Alaska represented in my state. So again, if I go to state and go to describe, I've got, let's see if it will show me everything. It's not showing me everything. Well, I wonder why that is. I'll figure that out. But anyway, we don't have all 50 states. I think we might actually have Hawaii down here. Or do we? No, we don't. But the reason we don't have anything else showing up is because we don't have the data. There are no sales in Hawaii or apparently Alaska. So that's just a state. All we have is a dimension. You can see we have 49 marks. If we have 49 marks, we should have, well, I'm not going to waste time. You can see that Tableau is using longitude and latitude. Remember, it generated that information automatically for us based on the geographical data that we provided. So again, it knows where Wyoming is and where Utah is, so on and so forth. The next thing I'm going to do is take sales. I'm going to add it to the color chart. And you'll notice that hold on one second. Whoops. I'm just trying to move this a little bit. That's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start this all over again. Double click on state. All right, I was trying to make this fit a little bit better. Let's see if I can. I guess that's it. It may be my monitor. It's cutting off part of the US there. Sorry that's bothering me. And again, there we go. That's what I was kind of looking for. So now we have excuse me. Excuse me, I muted the mic there so you don't have to hear me cough. What we have here is a simple visualization called a filled map. And all that happens is the measure, in this case sales, excuse me, we're using that to fill up a particular area. In this case, the area is, the boundary of the area is obviously the boundary of the states. And we're using shading to represent a higher amount, the low to the higher amount. The darker the shading, the higher the amount of the measure, in this case, sales. The lower the shading, the lower amount of sales. Now, in this, one thing to keep in mind with a filled map is that, again, what is shaded in is representative by the boundary of the shape. In this case, the boundary of the states. Well, states are obviously different sizes, right? Connecticut and Rhode Island are pretty small. Texas and California are pretty big. So you have to be careful when you're using a filled map not to mistakenly look at the size of the shape, in this case, the state, and use that as an indication of this the size of the measure. That's not going to always be the case. Clearly, we could look at this and see California has the most sales, but then after that, and then actually after that, I think New York, but between Texas and Florida and Washington, the shading is not necessarily all that clear, and so we might come to the conclusion that Texas is second or third. Well, let's put in our labels, and we'll see. We'll see that Texas is third. California has the highest sales. New York, the second highest. It does look like Texas is third. Washington is fourth. Actually, Pennsylvania is fifth. And then it looks like, if I'm doing this right, Florida might be sixth. But it's easy, at least I almost made this mistake, to overlook Pennsylvania because it's, the shading is so close and the shape of Florida is bigger than Pennsylvania, or at least to my eyes. Okay, so that's really all I want to do in terms of showing you how to create a map visualization. And in this case, it's a filled map. So I'm going to call this sales by state. And I guess in parentheses, I'll put filled map just to distinguish this by other maps. And I want to make sure we get to everything, so I don't want to take too much time. But in the map, in the map menu, we could actually choose different types of math. This is all visualization and preference, right? But I can change this map to look like a satellite if I want to do that. If that's a better visualization, I could do it to include streets, which in this case wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But we could do all kinds of different things if I want to make it, a light background, if I wanted to make a dark background, obviously depending on where I'm going to display it, what might be better, etc. I kind of tend to like, whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. That looks like a kind of an old-fashioned map, if you're as old as me. I'm going to go ahead and keep it on satellite. I kind of like that one. It's kind of cool looking. To me, you don't have to do any of this. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is create a different type of map, or a different type of, or what I'm going to do, is modify this map. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it so we have the same map. And what I'm going to do here is introduce something that we haven't talked about up to this point, and that's filters. So remember, we have a filter shelf here, and we could drag any dimension into any of these shelves, and that's going to give us a different level of detail. So let me take region, and I'm going to add it to the filter shelf, and I'm going to when I do that, Tableau says, all right, do you want me to just show central, east, south, or west? In this case, I'm going to say all. I want to see everything. I'm going to click OK. Now, I have the region pill in my filter shelf, but I don't see the actual filter. So you have to go back to the pill, go to the drop down and click Show Filter. I don't know why Tableau makes us go that extra step if we say we want to filter, but it does. And now we have this filter right here. And so now I can look at different regions. If I want to look at the east, I could zoom in and now I'm just looking at the east. If I want to look at just the central, I can look at just the central. If I want to look at the central and the east, I can do that, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's a filter. You could use a filter on any visualization. I could have used a filter on any of these line charts, on any of these bar charts. It's got nothing to do specifically with a map. It's just, it made sense to introduce the filter here so you could see what it does and how it can be used. So let me just change the name of this, sales by state, by region with filter, I guess. Okay, I'm going to do one more, well, I'm going to do several more visualizations, but one more map visualization. So I'm going to create a new map, excuse me, a new worksheet. This time, instead of clicking on state, I'm going to double click on postal code, zip code, right? And again, I'm going to get a map. But now, what I have represented in the map is, you could see 630 marks. So this is telling us that we have sales across 630 different zip codes across the United States. So that's great. This in itself could be an important visualization. We kind of see clustering of where we have, lots of different sales, right, in different zip codes. But I had no idea if, what the sales are in zip code 83201 versus what the sales are in zip code 90278. So to do that, I'm going to take sales and I'm going to drag it into the size mark card. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the sizes of each of these dots representative of the sale. So hopefully you could see this since it's all being projected on your computers, but we've got some pretty small dots here that, sales there are only 8, and some pretty big, dots here, sales are $25,000. Now, what I'm going to do is actually make the size of that shape, the circles, a bit bigger. That makes it a little bit easier to see, certainly the bigger ones. But what I'm going to also do is go into shapes. Oops, click on the right thing. There we go. I just wanted to get the shapes card to pop up. And we could modify the shapes. It was a filled in circle like that. We could change it to X's if we want. I don't know if that helps anything. We can make them open circles. Again, I'm not so sure that helps very much. So I'm going to go back to the way it was. And use solid circles. But what I'm going to do is change the opacity to make it a bit easier to see when shapes are on top of other shapes. And maybe that might be let's see if we change it to 50, what that's going to look like. And if that's a bit easier to view. I don't know if that's helpful or not. It doesn't look very helpful. But we could see I think perhaps a little bit better shapes, and you could see shapes within, that are covering other shapes that are in here. This is probably a really good type of map to have regions as a filter, so you could zoom in on uh, on different regions and really see. So let's zoom in on the east. Click, click, and we could really kind of see a bunch of overlapping zip codes uh, to kind of see what is, we could see zip code 10024 is pretty high, 10009 has high sales, so on and so forth. So that this is not called a filter map, this is called a symbol map. So I'm